I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember bacon makes everything better.
Welcome to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, brought to you by the North Carolina Pork Council. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. I'm Chris Edwards. Great to be back with DG here in year 2 of our quickly growing North Carolina Sports Network. On our show here in 2024, DG and I are going to mostly look ahead at the upcoming week in college football. We'll also discuss college football's biggest headlines and take a quick glance back with some of DG's expert analysis on the biggest games and developments from the previous week that you can't get anywhere else. DG now in his 38th year covering college football both here in North Carolina and around the ACC. DG, always good to see you.
Hey, it's great to see you, Chris, as always, and a quick shout out, especially to our friends and audience members in Western North Carolina. We lost some college football games this past weekend, including our scheduled trip to App State for that Liberty matchup. But some things are far more important than sports. So as I always cherish getting back together with you to talk sports, our hearts and minds are with a lot of those who are still struggling out in Western North Carolina and other parts of the country. Absolutely. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in our show. Let's also talk later in the show about Duke's big second half comeback over North Carolina and other Week 5 games. But we're going to get ahead to this week's action. Here in Week 6, a few very important storylines involving some in-state teams, so we get to those right away. This segment brought to you by our good friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, where they are also very proficient in delivering consistent and quality fleet service. If you or your company need a partner in that regard, it has grown to 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. Learn more at AtlanticTireOnline.com. Okay, DG, we'll get started with the one in Raleigh, noon on Saturday on the CW. 1-3 Wake Forest visiting 3-2 NC State. The Wolfpack a 5-point home favorite at Carter Finley. Yeah, Chris, we have to start whenever two of the Big Four face each other head-to-head. Although NC State has dominated this rivalry historically, winning roughly 2/3 of the time, it might surprise a lot of people that it's been a much more even matchup over the last 2 decades, which is when first Jim Grobe and now Dave Clawson have become, I would say, 2 of the best coaches in the history of Wake Forest football. Over the last 20 head-to-head matchups between the Wolfpack and the Demon Deacons on the gridiron, dating back to 2004, it is exactly even. 10 victories for the Pack, 10 victories for the Deacs. One more quick tidbit. ESPN has an analytics tool called the Football Power Index, or FPI. Right now, heading into this game, and I take no glee in sharing this information, the FPI has NC State and Wake Forest ranked as the 2 worst teams in the expanded Atlantic Coast Conference. The Wolfpack is right now ranked 16th, the Demon Deacons 17th. Remember, Wake's only win so far this season is over North Carolina A&T, an FCS opponent, and the Deacs have lost 3 straight, all at home, to UVA by 1 point, to top 10 Ole Miss by a 40-6 margin, and then this past week to Louisiana of the Sun Belt Conference, 41-38 in a nail-biter. State, of course, was absolutely boat raced by both Tennessee and Clemson earlier this year, and none of the Wolfpack's 3 victories over Western Carolina, Louisiana Tech, and most recently Northern Illinois came very easily. I do think State is the better team this year, mainly because the Wolfpack has more quality talent and playmakers on defense. In a close game against Northern Illinois this past weekend, D.K. Kaufman, a 5th-year senior transfer from Auburn, who was a 2-year starter for the Tigers in the Southeastern Conference, and a really valuable pickup in the transfer portal by Dave Doran and his staff this summer,
came on a safety blitz in the NIU game, sacked the quarterback, all this himself, caused the fumble, and then picked up the fumble himself and ran it in for a touchdown. In a contest that the Wolfpack won by only 7 points, that was clearly the play of the game, and he was honored, DK Kaufman, by the ACC, as you'd expect, for that play and his other performance. Davin Van up front, Caden Fordham and Sean Brown at linebacker, Aiden White at cornerback. That's a pretty strong defensive foundation that Wake just does not have right now personnel-wise. And I think that state defense is trying to lead the way while the Pack's true freshman quarterback, C.J. Bailey, continues to grow up a little bit week to week. Final thought on this one, Wake does have considerable talent on offense, including their transfer quarterback, Hank Bachmeier, star running back, Damon Claiborne, although he was injured in that loss to Louisiana. So we'll see if and how much he plays against the Pack. Also, wide receivers Taylor Morin and Donovan Green. But NC State probably views Wake's defensive struggles as a chance for the Wolfpack offense to make more plays, both in the running game with Jordan Waters and others, and in the passing game with Bailey throwing to guys like star wideout KC Concepcion, the talented new transfer tight end Justin Jolie, and maybe even wideout Wesley Grimes, who is a former Wake Forest football player who transferred to NC State during the offseason to get back a little closer to home.
All right, let's talk about game 2. How about the undefeated Duke Blue Devils, 5-0 on the road this week at 3-2 Georgia Tech, the primetime game on ACC Network, 8 o'clock kickoff in Midtown Atlanta. The Jackets, a 7-point favorite at home.
Yeah, I know we're mostly looking forward here, but we have to start with a quick shout out to our recent guest on the David Glenn Show, the first-year Duke head coach Manny Diaz and the Blue Devils. Duke has not started 5-0 in football, Chris. I gave you a reference last week that was before you were born. I do think you were born by 1994. Am I right?
Yeah, barely, but yes.
All right. Duke has not started 5-0 in football since 1994, when maybe you were wearing diapers rather than changing diapers, right, when the Devils did it under first-year coach Fred Goldsmith, who ended up finishing only 8-4 that year after that 4-0 start, but also did win the Bobby Dodd National Coach of the Year award. Why? Because it's hard to win in football at Duke. What did we say on last week's show? The most obvious advantage that Duke had over Carolina was its absolute belief in its ability to execute its game plan on defense, which is Manny Diaz's number one area of expertise, and which has now led the Devils to 5 consecutive victories, despite some pretty inconsistent production from the Blue Devils offense. Duke's 21-20 victory over Carolina after trailing 20-0, we were there, midway through the third quarter, was a testament to good coaching, great player conditioning, and the ability to stick to the plan, even through considerable adversity, even against a hated arch rival. It was the second biggest comeback victory in Duke football history, and it happened in front of a sold-out crowd of 35,000 plus at Wallace Wade Stadium. We were there to see it with our Old North State tailgate and traveling sports circus all the way through that victory bell celebration on the field at the end. I encourage folks to check out Ben McCormick's article. It's entitled The Sewer, about how the Blue Devils finally figured out a way to beat the Heels and how they believed, the players, that their intense offseason conditioning program was one of the things that tilted the scales in their favor during that amazing second half comeback against the Heels. All that said, as we glance forward, I do understand why Georgia Tech is the favorite over Duke this week in Atlanta. The reason the 5-0 Devils are not ranked in the national top 25 right now is that voters just don't respect the overall quality of their competition to this point. The Devils' 5 victories are over real quick: Elon, Northwestern, UConn, Middle Tennessee State, and Carolina. And there is not a single above-average football squad in that group. Georgia Tech is not an elite team, but the Yellow Jackets probably will prove to be the best team Duke has faced so far this season. The Jackets have one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the ACC in Haynes King, and it might surprise a lot of people that among the ACC's 17 teams, only high-powered Miami has scored more touchdowns than the Yellow Jackets have scored this season. That's 22 for Tech. Under head coach Brent Key, a former All-ACC offensive lineman for the Yellow Jackets, Tech does like to run the ball, both with King from the quarterback position and also running back Jamal Haynes. King also has two really speedy and productive wide receivers in Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton Jr. Lastly, Georgia Tech has played pretty strong run defense this season. And the only teams that have defeated the Yellow Jackets, Syracuse with Kyle McCord, veteran quarterback, Louisville with the seventh-year senior Tyler Shuck at quarterback. Both of those teams that beat Tech got strong performances from their quarterback in the passing game. That means that Duke's QB, Malik Murphy, the Texas transfer, who did make some big-time throws in the Devils' victory at Northwestern in overtime earlier this season, Murphy may need to have one of the best games of his relatively young college career if he is going to lead the Devils to an upset victory in Atlanta.
All right, game 3, the team the Blue Devils beat this past week, North Carolina Tar Heels. They're back home at Kenan Stadium taking on 4-0 Pittsburgh, noon on ESPN2. The Panthers, 3-point road favorites this week.
Yeah, there's no need to sugarcoat it. 73-year-old UNC coach Mac Brown has a football-style crisis on his hands in Chapel Hill. I say football-style crisis because Hurricane Helene and its aftermath left real-world crises in its wake. Now it's an undefeated Pitt team coming to Kenan Stadium, as you said, with a lot of confidence, just as the Tar Heels have tens of thousands of frustrated alumni descending upon Chapel Hill for the school's annual homecoming weekend. Immediately after the Tar Heels' 3-0 start, which, remember, did include a solid road win at Minnesota of the Big Ten, the Heels gave up that school record 70 points at home in the loss to James Madison. And then, as we just explored, they coughed up the 20-0 third-quarter lead to Duke in what became that second biggest comeback in the history of Blue Devils football. In the JMU game, remember, since this matchup with Pitt is at Kenan, that was a family weekend in Chapel Hill, and tens of thousands of Carolina fans headed for the exits by halftime of that game. Pitt's coach, Pat Narduzzi, had by far the worst season of his 10-year tenure in the Steel City last year, when the Panthers had an anemic offense and truly horrible quarterback play on the way to a 3-9 record. Thanks in part to a talent infusion, including an Alabama quarterback transfer and several key figures who were important parts of Western Carolina's impressive football season a year ago. Pitt is putting up some big offensive numbers and already has impressive comeback victories over two of its regional rivals in non-conference play, Cincinnati and West Virginia. The Panthers are averaging, wait for these numbers, 48 points and 523 yards per game. Both of those numbers rank behind only Miami among ACC teams. They are doing it, the Panthers, under the direction of first-year offensive coordinator Cade Bell, son of Western Carolina head football coach Kerwin Bell, and the Catamounts' former offensive coordinator, of course. And they're doing it with former Western Carolina running back Desmond Reed rushing for more than 100 yards per game on about 7 yards per carry. After suffering through that horrendous QB play that I mentioned last season, Pitt has received a huge lift from redshirt freshman Eli Holstein, an Alabama transfer who was a big-time prep star in Louisiana before signing with the Crimson Tide out of high school. Holstein has been a true dual threat for the Panthers, averaging almost 50 rushing yards per game and almost 300 passing yards per game. His favorite targets have been wide receivers Kanata Mumfield and Kenny Johnson, who can fly and also is a return man, plus Desmond Reed as a receiver out of the backfield. The Tar Heels will have their hands full in this one, especially defensively. In terms of the X's and O's, the most fascinating aspect of this matchup to me will come when the Tar Heels have the ball. The one thing this Carolina team does consistently well is run the ball. As a team, The Heels are averaging an ACC best 209 rushing yards per game, and individually, UNC's All-American running back Omarion Hampton, the junior, ranks number 1 nationally with 114 carries and number 5 nationally with about 132 rushing yards per game. Under Narduzzi, who, remember, was a longtime defensive coordinator at Michigan State before he took the Pitt head coaching job, the Panthers tend to stack the box on defense and dare you to try to throw the ball downfield, where their defensive backs play as physically and with as much physical contact as any defense I have seen in my 38 years covering this league. Pitt's opponents are averaging less than 3 yards per carry on the ground so far this season, so it will be interesting to see if, number 1, Omarion Hampton can get going against another defense that's designed specifically to slow him down, and number 2, whether Carolina's 5th-year senior quarterback, the former third stringer Jacoby Criswell, can make enough big passing plays downfield against that style of defense I described to make Pitt pay for stacking the box. Criswell is playing behind an offensive line that has had problems with pass blocking all season, but he does have a strong arm, excellent tight ends in Bryson Nesbitt and John Copenhaver, and a few quality wide receivers led by another recent DG Show guest, J.J. Jones.
All right, let's wrap up this opening segment, but give me maybe a game or two involving other in-state teams that deserves maybe more of a brief mention this week.
Yeah, too quickly. ECU is at Charlotte, and App State is at Marshall. The 3-2 Pirates are flat out a better team and a better program than the 2-3 49ers, and especially now that those two in-state schools are both members of the American Athletic Conference, ECU needs to prove it convincingly right there on Charlotte's home field with the Pirates' stingy defense, maybe creating some turnovers and otherwise leading the way for Coach Mike Houston. Meanwhile, App State hits the road after that cancellation at home against Liberty. The best Sun Belt teams that I have seen so far this season are the James Madison team that beat Carolina in Chapel Hill and the Louisiana team that just beat Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. App State and Marshall, to this point, have looked to me more like middle-of-the-pack Sun Belt teams. The Mountaineers have looked really shaky on defense, especially, so it probably will be up to quarterback Joey Aguilar and the App State offense, which is talented, to carry the day if Coach Sean Clark is going to post an important road victory at Marshall prior to his team's very difficult road trip to Louisiana next week to face the Ragin' Cajuns on their home field.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and have more of This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by the North Carolina Port Council, right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. I am a better person and a more effective business owner for having known and learned from Emily Parks over many years now. Emily's company, Organize for Success, helps multi-passionate business owners and executives bring harmony to all the layers of their lives, from work to side projects, from friends and family to hobbies, community, and beyond. With Emily's help, you too can make every minute matter. She helps you determine what earns your time and how to efficiently accomplish what matters. One of the many things I love about Emily is that she does not impose her will on her clients. She listens to them. That way she can better help them cultivate the lives they want to live. You can set up a complimentary call with Emily today by visiting organizeforsuccess.com.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by the North Carolina Port Council here on the North Carolina Sports Network. All right, DG, diving into our ACC and National Week 6 look ahead. It's brought to you by our good friends at XL Moving and Storage, a family-owned Allied Vans partner here in North Carolina.
with 25 years of award-winning experience that can help you with your move to North Carolina, within North Carolina, or away from North Carolina, even internationally, while also assisting with your storage needs. You can learn more at excelms.com. That's Excel Moving and Storage. There is only one top 25 versus top 25 matchup in the entire Week 6 national schedule, and it happens to involve a couple of head coaches that we know pretty good here in the Old North State. So let's start with that one. Number 9, Missouri, 4-0. At number 25, Texas A&M, they're 4-1. This is noon on Saturday on ABC. Aggies a 2-point favorite in College Station.
Chris, I've gotten to know you pretty well, but I don't know if you're a movie buff. Are you a movie guy?
I do okay.
Okay, so are you familiar with the games? I guess it's a game. Yeah, it's kind of a game. It's 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Okay. I think of this football matchup in sports terms the way the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon game goes in movie terms.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know it, let's just pick a famous actor. Like Steve Martin would have a Kevin Bacon number of 1 because both he and Kevin Bacon appeared in the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Everybody remembers Steve Martin and John Candy were the co-stars. Bacon actually had a small role, but it still counts, right?
Yeah.
Everybody would know A Few Good Men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jack Nicholson would have a Kevin Bacon number of 1 because he and Kevin Bacon both had unforgettable roles, if you remember. I believe that Tom Cruise guy was also in that unforgettable scene. You Can't Handle the Truth, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Jack Nicholson, Kevin Bacon, degree number of 1. But if I said Ben Affleck, unless I'm forgetting something, Ben Affleck would have a Bacon number of 3 because one way to connect the dots would be that whereas Affleck and Bacon have never been in the same movie together, that again would be a 1. One route that you could take, and if you have another, please feel free. Affleck starred in Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon, so that's 1. Damon starred in Ocean's 11 with Julia Roberts, so that's 2 degrees. And then Roberts starred in Flatliners with Kevin Bacon. So that's 3, right? So that's 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon for Ben Affleck. I wish we had time for more examples, but we don't. Anything you want to chime in with there?
No, you got it. You covered it. It's great.
I got to get to the football eventually, right? Anyway, in the only top 25 versus top 25 college football game of the entire weekend, both the Missouri football coach Eli Drinkwitz and the Texas A&M football coach Mike Elko have only 1 degree of separation, if you will, with the great state of North Carolina. Drinkwitz, who is in his 5th season as the head coach at Missouri, remember, was Dave Doran's offensive coordinator at NC State from 2016 through 2018, and he was App State's head coach for 1 and only 1 year, but it was a great one in 2019 when the Mountaineers went 12-1 under Eli Drinkwitz, won the Sun Belt title, and finished in the national top 25 rankings. Mike Elko, of course, was Duke's head coach for the past 2 seasons. He was the 2022 ACC Coach of the Year for the Devils, and then he left to accept a 6-year, $42 million offer, movie-style money, to take over at Texas A&M, a school that was on the hook for that all-time record buyout, remember, of more than $75 million under the terms of its dismissal of head coach Jimbo Fisher after last season. Drinkwitz is an offensive guru, although this year's Missouri team also has played really good defense and has only given up about 12 points per game. Elko is a defensive guru by trade. The Aggies are giving up only 16 points per game. Missouri has the higher ranking and the perfect record right now at 4-0, as you mentioned. A&M has the home field advantage, though, at Kyle Field, which has a capacity of almost 103,000. Missouri has a 5th-year senior and 3-year starter in quarterback Brady Cook, although the Tigers have not made many big plays in the passing game so far this season. A&M has been starting a redshirt freshman named Marcel Reed at QB. He's one of those guys who, at least at this stage of his career, great athlete, not yet a strong passer. He's in in place of the NFL prospect for A&M, Connor Wigman, who suffered an injury to his right or throwing shoulder in the Aggies season opening loss to Notre Dame. This is an evenly matched game. It's likely going to be about coaching and big plays and turnovers and mental mistakes. And for those reasons, I like just by a little bit the Aggies to take advantage of one of the largest crowds in all of college football and post a top 25 victory right there on their home field.
All right, how about game 2? This one back in July felt a lot better than maybe it does right now. Number 15, Clemson on the road at Florida State. Tigers a 16-point favorite in Tallahassee. Saturday night, 7 o'clock on ESPN.
Yeah, we have to mention this one in part because these two schools have combined to win 12 of the last 13 ACC championships on the gridiron, with the Tigers earning 8 in that period under their current coach, Dabo Swinney, of course, and the Seminoles capturing 4. That was 3 straight under Jimbo Fisher from 2012 through 2014, and then last year, of course, under Mike Norvell. These same 2 schools, of course, are in the process of suing the Atlantic Coast Conference over its exit fee, its grant of rights, and other off-the-field legal matters. While it's definitely true that Clemson and FSU, by the way, do bring far more value to the ACC's television deals than any other school, the TV numbers during football season back that up, even in years where either the Tigers or the Seminoles are not having banner seasons. It's also true that both of those schools knew exactly what they were doing when they agreed to those terms willingly and repeatedly under multiple administrations, and now they're simply trying to back out by asserting a variety of Hail Mary-style legal arguments that they hope will find either a sympathetic or partisan judge or simply exhaust the ACC financially until they get some type of legal settlement offer from the conference. We'll see how that plays out in the courts. As we warned everyone repeatedly almost a year ago now, don't expect a conclusion here in the 2024 calendar year. In terms of the on-field matchup between the Tigers and the Seminoles, you also could call this the DJU Bowl. DJ Uiagalelei was Clemson's primary starter at quarterback in both 2021 and 2022 when the Tigers went a combined 21-6, which is a great record at most places, but not so much during this Dabo Swinney era at Clemson. After his backup, Cade Klubnik was the MVP, remember, of the Tigers' 2022 ACC championship game over UNC, that victory. Uiagalelei saw the writing on the wall, hit the transfer portal. He did have a strong campaign at Oregon State last year in Pac-12 country, but then he entered the portal again. At a time when both Cam Ward of Washington State and DJ Uiagalelei of Oregon State were both considering the Seminoles during the offseason, Mike Norvell accepted the commitment of Uiagalelei. And that decision, as well as FSU's entire 2024 campaign, has turned out to be an unmitigated disaster, at least to this point. While Ward has led Miami into the national top 10 and he's become a Heisman Trophy candidate, Uiagalelei has shown a lot of the same inconsistency that plagued him at Clemson. He's completing only 53% of his passes. That is the worst accuracy rate by far of any ACC starting quarterback. He offers next to nothing in the running game. FSU is dead last in the ACC in scoring offense at only 15 points per game, and the Seminoles are off to that 1-4 start and one of the most disappointing seasons in all of major college football. Clemson, meanwhile, has bounced back pretty darn impressively from that ugly season-opening 34-3 loss to Georgia in Atlanta. The Tigers have annihilated each of their 3 opponents since then, App State, NC State, and Stanford, all at Death Valley. And they're probably going to be the favorite in every game they play for the rest of the regular season. As I said back in August, I will personally be surprised if Clemson is not one of the 2 teams playing for the ACC title in Charlotte in early December. I do not think this is one of Dabo Swinney's best teams, to be clear, but I definitely think it's good enough to win the ACC title or at least play in that game. And I think there's a shot that even these Tigers could end up in the newly expanded college football playoff. You would think that Florida State, a proud program, will put up a fight in this rivalry game, especially since it's in Tallahassee. but the Seminoles defense is going to have to create turnovers and some short fields for that anemic offense if they're going to have a realistic chance of pulling the upset here.
All right, get ready for the first time ever on Saturday night, ACC After Dark. You ready?
Yeah.
Number 8 Miami, 5-0. The Hurricanes on the road in Berkeley to take on 3-1 Cal. A 10:30 kickoff Eastern time on ESPN. Hurricanes favored by 10 points on the road.
Yeah, if you're willing to stay up late for this one and catch it in that late TV window on ESPN, it actually does match Cam Ward, the number 8 ranked Hurricanes, and the ACC's highest scoring offense. That's Miami, 49 points per game roughly, against the ACC's number 1 defense, at least statistically, with Cal giving up only 12.8 points per game during its 3-1 start. This weekend, by the way, also will give many ACC fans and others across North Carolina their first close-up look at the game day football atmosphere at Cal, because ESPN's popular college game day show, which airs from 9 a.m. to noon here in the East, will be in Berkeley, California for the first time since that show first became a traveling circus way back in 1993. Keep in mind, a show that airs from 9 a.m. to noon our time is actually broadcasting live from 6 to 9 a.m. on the West Coast. So it will be interesting to see what kind of crowd they draw for that morning session with Herb Street and the boys, even if they do fully expect that California Memorial Stadium, it's an on-campus facility that seats 60,000 plus, but often has been 1/3 or even half empty at times in recent years as the Bears have struggled on the gridiron. They expect that stadium to be filled to capacity and very loud by game time. As we've discussed for weeks now, Miami's offense is the real deal. The Canes not only have 11 starters that they truly believe in on that side of the ball, they have really impressive depth at running back, tight end, and wide receiver too. Whether Cal's statistically dominant defense is also the real deal, to me, is the most fascinating question of this game. The Bears did win at Auburn 21-14, and they did battle Florida State in Tallahassee pretty impressively before ultimately falling 14-9 to the Seminoles. Cal plays an unusual 2-4-5 defense, essentially with 2 defensive tackles, 4 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. And they really like their 2 inside linebackers a lot. Guy named Teddy Buchanan, a 5th-year senior transfer who spent the past 4 years at the FCS level, and sophomore Cade Ulawave, who was the Pac-12's Defensive Freshman of the Year last season. The Miami offense is by far the most dynamic group that Cal has faced so far this season. So I will be surprised if the Canes don't put up 30-plus even on that defensively strong Bears team. But it will be interesting to see if Cal's star running back, Jaden Ott, and starting quarterback, the sophomore Fernando Mendoza, can keep the chains moving offensively and keep that offense and Cam Ward on the sidelines for as long as possible. If there is a script for Cal to pull the upset in that late-night TV window, and I am highly skeptical, it will have to include a time of possession advantage as at least one of the major storylines.
As an aside, it'll be interesting to see how many people make it at 6 a.m. that are still available
to
make it at 7:30 that night.
Staying power, brother. Staying power.
You gotta pace yourself, as you go throughout the day. Stay with us. More of This Week in College Football. David Glenn, presented by the North Carolina Port Council, coming up in a moment on the North Carolina Sports Network.
The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by 3 actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up. King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach is the longest running restaurant in New Hanover County. That's since 1947, and it recently was renovated to an impeccable degree by our good friends Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife Keaton. Their outstanding chefs offer fresh local seafood, salad options, and creative, tasty variations of pork, beef, and poultry dishes. King Neptune has always been a great choice for dinner and or drinks, and now it's open for lunch and brunch too. Check out the lunch, brunch, and dinner menus at neptuneswb.com. That's Neptunes with an S, then WB for Wrightsville Beach. Again, the King Neptune Restaurant website is neptuneswb.com.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by our friends at the North Carolina Port Council. Diving right in now to our coaches and quarterbacks segment, DG, brought to you by our good friends at Lawson Insurance, who are about to celebrate their 50th anniversary of helping DG and many other North Carolina citizens and businesses with their personal and commercial insurance needs. You can reach out to the brothers Ken Miller and Michael Lawson. Like us, they're all huge sports fans. Give them a call, 919-846-2090, or searching Lawson Insurance online. DJ, we've talked a lot about head coaches, particularly last week, including some in-state coaches that might be on the hot seat. So today, let's talk about quarterbacks. Now that we're getting close to the midway point of the regular season, which in-state or ACC quarterback have you been most impressed with so far?
Yeah, number one, Cam Ward. Number two, Kyle McCord of Syracuse. Number three, the guy that many North Carolinians will get a closer look at this week, Eli Holstein of Pitt. In my eyes, Ward is up there alongside Colorado's two-way star Travis Hunter and maybe Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe as the midseason Heisman Trophy favorites. Ward's 18 passing touchdowns lead the entire nation. He's completing more than 70% of his throws. And in a very close game against Virginia Tech last week that had a controversial finish that we don't have time to get into, Ward led the Hurricanes to touchdowns on their final three drives to erase a pair of 10-point deficits and post a comeback victory over the Hokies. That is exactly the sort of alpha male type guy that head coach Mario Cristobal described to us when he joined us on the David Glenn Show back in the preseason. Number two, Syracuse's Kyle McCord actually leads the ACC in passing with 365 aerial yards per game. He's thrown 14 touchdown passes against only 5 interceptions, and he's completing almost 2/3 of his throws during the Orange's solid 3-1 start. He also has that confidence that seems to exude into the rest of that Syracuse roster. Pitt's Holstein is actually third in the ACC in total offense, behind only Ward and McCord, and he has led the Panthers to a 4-0 start that also has included that dual threat production and those comeback victories that I mentioned earlier for the Panthers against Cincinnati and West Virginia. By the way, as I put a pin on this question or answer, plenty of other ACC quarterbacks have been pretty good too. Those are just the first three. Thomas Castellanos is not asked to throw the ball much, but he's been a really good dual threat quarterback at Boston College during the Eagles' impressive start. Tyler Shuck of Louisville, Cade Klubnik of Clemson, Kevin Jennings of SMU, who beat out their starter from last year, Preston Stone, who was ranked by Pro Football Focus as the best returning quarterback in the ACC this year for the Mustangs. Kevin Jennings, his backup, beat out Stone, and the Mustangs are off to a good start. Haynes King of Georgia Tech has been good. Hank Bachmeier at Wake Forest. I know the Deacs have not been winning, but it hasn't been, for the most part, the offense's fault. Bachmeier's been really good. Even an Anthony Calandria at UVA deserves some plaudits. That's almost 2/3 of the league's starting QBs who have earned at least some level of praise. So overall, there's been far more good than bad at that position, which the ACC really hyped up back in the preseason.
All right. Well, what about the flip side? Maybe a couple of ACC or in-state quarterbacks that's been disappointment so far as we reach the midway point of the season.
Yeah, quickly here. I don't want to beat up anybody, but DJ Uiagalelei of Florida State has been a disaster so far. Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech has really not lived up to the hype. And Grayson McCall at NC State, in part for injury reasons, but he wasn't even all that good for the Wolfpack before he got hurt either. In all three cases, we did our best back in the preseason to paint an accurate picture of both how all three of these guys provided, on the one hand, legitimate reasons for optimism, but on the other hand, also legitimate reasons for at least some cause for concern. Uiagalelei and Kyron Drones have never proven to be consistently accurate passers from the pocket. And even though Drones is a great athlete, eventually college defenses are going to realize that limitation, game plan for that limitation, and expose that weakness on game day. That is a big part of what's happened to the Seminoles and the Hokies this season in their disappointing campaigns to this point. Grayson McCall, as we've mentioned on several previous shows, definitely does have a long-term body of work that proves he can be a sensational quarterback, but he did not have a good season last year at Coastal Carolina after those 3 years where he was the Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year for the Chanticleers. McCall was injured for much of 2023 after that wicked head-hunting spearing hit that knocked him out with a concussion. Now he's injured again this season in Raleigh, and it's still not clear when he'll be back for the Wolfpack or what kind of performance he is capable of delivering if and when he does return.
All right, we'll come back, wrap things up with DG right here on This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by the North Carolina Port Council on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Whether you are moving locally, nationally, or even internationally, and whether you're a residential or commercial customer, please consider our friends at XL Moving and Storage, an award-winning Allied Van Lines agent with offices in Greensboro and Raleigh. Thanks to their 25 years of experience helping North Carolinians all across the state with their moving and storage needs, XL has become the trusted hometown North Carolina moving services company. Our good friends Jim Dorsett and Jody Hatley, along with their hardworking staff, offer customized, tailored relocation and storage solutions to the people of North Carolina and beyond. Visit them online today at xlms.com. That's EXCELMS.com. If you are anywhere near Wilmington, North Carolina, and looking for a little live music, a cold beer, a tangy slushie, a fun crowd, or just a taste of the good life at the beach, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach is the place for you. Located on North Lumina Avenue, just one block from the sand and waves of the Atlantic Ocean, Jimmy's features a full bar with nightly beer and drink specials, and it hosts musical performers almost every day of the year. One more fun fact, Jimmy's annual Children's Bike Drive, which started in 2017, now distributes more than 1,000 bicycles and helmets per year to young people in the Wilmington area and beyond. Jimmy's Bar, your home away from home on Lumina Avenue in Wrightsville Beach.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by our friends at the North Carolina Port Council. All right, as you know, the focus of This Week in College Football is going to be mostly forward-looking as often as possible. We're also going to take a quick glance back at the previous weekend around college football, in part because DG tends to find intriguing angles and offers unique observations or historical perspectives that you can't find anywhere else. So with that thought in mind, we bring you our quick glance back to Week 5, brought to you by our great friends at Jimmy's Bar and King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach. Jimmy's has a full bar, nightly drink specials, and live music 365 days out of the year. And right next door, it's King Neptune, that's become one of the best restaurants in the entire greater Wilmington area. Keep up with Jimmy's on Facebook and learn more about King Neptune Restaurant at neptuneswb.com. All right, DG, Week 5 offered some intriguing developments beyond those we've already talked about, including a scheduled matchup, as we mentioned, where you, Mike Waddell, and others from our North Carolina Sports Network team were supposed to see in person as part of our 2024 Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, Liberty at App State in Boone, a game that was ultimately canceled. You guys pivoted, went to Duke, Carolina, and I could tell from the fans you interviewed in Durham, a lot of folks had a great time at Wallace Wade Stadium. But all that was standing,
rough time for our friends in the western part of the state over the past week because of the aftermath of that unprecedented flooding and everything that we've seen with Hurricane Helene. So I know you've got a soft spot in your heart for Boone. Your daughter Avery is senior at App State, and they're in Asheville as well. A big part of those friends there, of your statewide radio audience in North Carolina for a long time. You're connected to Western North Carolina in a very personal way. So curious to get your message, your thoughts to our friends in the western part of the state that are watching today.
Yeah, quickly on this, and I mentioned some of my sentiments at the top of today's show, but first, thank you to the true heroes out there, the first responders and others, whether acting in an official capacity or an unofficial capacity, maybe just neighbor to neighbor, who have put themselves truly in harm's way to help others in truly horrendous circumstances that make all of this stuff in our sports world seem very trivial in comparison, which of course it is. Second, thank you to all those who have donated their time, their money, their other resources in this ongoing recovery effort. And finally, and this part really does upset me, but shame on those. I called some of them out on Twitter in a very public way this past week, and I do not apologize for that even a little bit. Shame on those for using this tragedy as the latest opportunity for them to spread their endless supply of misinformation and disinformation for political purposes. You are, and let me speak clearly here, you are truly horrible human beings, period. And you are hurting our country with your endless lies and your nonstop grift. It saddens me, Chris. I'm a journalism school graduate where you are taught to properly process information and distill it and digest it and then turn around and present it in a fair and accurate way. I practiced law for a long time, where critical thinking skills are one of the most important things that they teach you in law school. And in my opinion, other than things like kindness and how to treat the appropriate way to treat other people, which is one of the most important things any of us can learn, I honestly believe that critical thinking skills are somewhere else on that short list of the most important things that human beings need to survive and function effectively here in the 21st century. And a lot of people really lack those critical thinking skills, along with the horrible, horrible human beings. And again, that is what you are. I invite any of you into any public forum to debate any of these things. I will volunteer to give you the worst intellectual beating, and that's what it would be, of your entire lives. People who lie on purpose for profit are despicable human beings. I want to be as clear as I possibly can be about that because it is an absolute epidemic in our country right now. You wouldn't think that people would lie on purpose for profit. You wouldn't think that people would just create a daily rage machine to upset people in, doesn't matter if it's in accurate ways, doesn't matter to them if it's in ignorant ways. You wouldn't think people would want to profit off of such things. But even something as bad as some of the worst flooding in the history of the western part of North Carolina has inspired some of these scumbags to go back to their bag of nasty tricks and just lie to people on purpose for political reasons. You're a bad person for your nonstop grift. You're a bad person for your endless lies. And I hope you sleep poorly at night if that's how you feel like you have to make a living. Besides those folks themselves, I want to tell the rest of our audience, whether you want to hear it or not, those of you who keep these horrific human beings in your information ecosystem, you are part of the problem too. You are part of the problem too. If you do not penalize the American news channels that keep having to pay 9-figure legal settlements, you know how hard it is to screw up so badly, to tell so many lies on purpose that you have to pay out 9-figure legal settlements, the biggest in the history of the world when it comes to these sorts of First Amendment type issues. You got to be the worst of the worst when you trust those channels after they're caught lying to you repeatedly on purpose about very important things, you are part of the problem. When you trust the same scumbags who lie to you about what was and what was not happening during the recovery effort in Western North Carolina, when you catch them in lies, but you keep them in your information ecosystem for some twisted reason, maybe they tell you what you want to hear, even though they're lying to you all the time, you, as part of their audience, are part of the problem. Stop. If somebody once told you that there were child actors in the Sandy Hook massacre of little boys and girls, and you figured out that that person was lying to you, but you still watch and listen to them, and you still let them manufacture a mega $1 million industry, which, by the way, they've lost because they're pathological liars and sociopaths who need people like you to have their economic models, something's wrong with you if you keep those people in your information ecosystem. You are part of the problem too if you do that, and you're making yourselves dumber, more ignorant, more racist, more bigoted, less informed, more angry versions of yourselves. You are disrespecting yourself by keeping those horrible people in your world. When you catch them, not accidental wrongs. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm not talking about that. Not all misstatements are equal. When you catch outlets or people repeatedly lying to you on purpose repeatedly about important things repeatedly, you need to cut them out of your lives. These nonstop conspiracy theory lunatics and other blindly partisan hacks, some of them literally documented to be on the Russian payroll. You're disrespecting yourself and you're hurting our country when you contribute to their success. Your ignorance is their oxygen. If you were smarter and you cut them out, they would choke and die, which in this particular context is the absolutely best ending possible. Do not expect me as a fellow human being, and I am dead serious about this, and I don't care even a little bit what any person thinks about this. Do not expect me to respect you as a fellow human being, or at least the way you think. I will respect your humanity. I will not respect your opinion or how you think. If you cannot respect yourself enough to cut these idiots out of your information ecosystem. I don't like taking our show in this direction, Chris, but I am extremely passionate about the people that I love, including my daughter, an App State senior, including a lot of friends in the Asheville area who have been the victims of these sociopathic, pathologically lying scumbags who decided to take the aftermath of a horrible hurricane and use it as their latest blindly partisan hack nut job conspiracy theory, when all it takes is a quick Google search to figure out that they were lying out of both corners of their mouth. If they don't have an audience, they don't survive. And millions of people are part of those ridiculous audiences, and they need to stop, at least if they want my respect.
All right, DG, back to the football field now. Among in-state teams and players, really at any level of college football, who else do you see as deserving maybe of a shout-out for either the where they stand, where they're headed in Week 6, or for their Week 5 performance in particular?
Well, I'm glad you gave me a chance to follow up that angry answer with something much nicer, Chris. So thank you. Shout out to Lenore Ryan, based in Hickory, North Carolina. We interviewed their coach, Mike Jacobs, last year on their way to the Division II semifinals of the playoffs. And shout out to them for getting off to another great start this season. The Bears are now 4-0. They're up to number 6 in the national rankings under their new head coach, Doug Socha, after they beat Tusculum on Sunday, 37-23. That game actually was postponed from Saturday because of the severe weather conditions that pushed back this scheduled Saturday kickoff. Shout out to, once again, head coach Maurice Flowers and Johnson C. Smith University, based in Charlotte, which is now off to its first 5-0 start in more than 4 decades. And this week, Chris, is ranked in the Division II coaches top 25 for the first time in the history of the program.
Wow.
They are in at number 24, the Golden Bulls. They crushed Bluefield State 42-3 last week. They host 2-2 Virginia State this Saturday. Coach Flowers is a Johnson C. Smith alum who has worked his way over many years up the high school and college coaching ranks since his days as a high school football star himself at East Mecklenburg High School right there in Charlotte as well. And finally, a shout out to Guilford College, based in Greensboro, which happens to be the alma mater of our own Mike Waddell, who did indeed play football for the Quakers back in the day. Guilford is off to a 3-0 start in non-conference play at the Division III level and was able to use last week's open date as extra practice time for when the Quakers begin play in the Old Dominion Athletic Conference with these back-to-back road trips in the Commonwealth this week at Hampton-Sydney, next week at Randolph-Macon. So shout out to Mike, who, of course, is also our producer on This Week in College Football.
All right, that'll wrap it up for us this week. Thanks to the North Carolina Port Council for being the founding partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. And we welcome Atlantic Tire and Service, now with 6 locations in the Triangle, as our newest sponsor. A quick reminder, DG and his staff post daily articles at our fast-growing website, ncsportsnetwork.com, which also has direct links on its homepage to this YouTube channel, the wide variety of places you can get on-demand audio of podcasts, and, of course, this show, along with the David Glenn Show, and all of our other offerings, and updates on year 2 of our Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, which will be in Wilmington, North Carolina, the Port City, on October 12th and 13th for our North Carolina Port Council football weekend at the beach. A 2-day tailgate stop will include visits with our good friend Bob Hubbard at the original Saltworks on Oleander Drive in Wilmington, plus Jimmy and Keaton Galeese at Jimmy's Bar and King Neptune Restaurant right there in Wrightsville Beach. So, for David Glenn, I'm Chris Edwards. Thanks again for joining us on This Week in College Football with David Glenn right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.